citizen, same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome to another episode of the People Powered Planet podcast, where each week we have amazing solutionaries, people who are not focused just on the problems of the world, but also on solutions to uplift us and begin to build toward what Gary Davis called the People Powered Planet. Today, as our special guest, we have Frisch, who is an amazing visionary and is active in so many different fields. She's one of the key people working for prevention of nuclear war. She's also a key person in the nonviolent peace force, helping to quell existing conflicts. And she's very active, almost a nonstop whirlwind of activity to help save the planet and preserve life on Earth. Tell us, Ann, how did you first get started, and why were you first compelled to work on the nuclear issue?
I grew up, just believing I could be my own person. I never felt my parents were directing me in any way. You should be a musician, you should love Russian literature, you should be an artist. We just did art whenever we could. My mother studied Mahatma Gandhi for many years, just read his stuff, and then of course we talked about it at the dinner table. She's the only woman I know on the planet Earth that received the congressional records on McCarthy hearings on her front porch. There were so many, the post office bound them together and she read them. She knew what was going on. So you can imagine, I'm a young girl at this time and I'm seeing what's going on. So when I was 16, I joined the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And during those days, we used to call in the newspaper because we got a little line of credit somewhere. And the guy at the other end said, "Oh, is that a commie organization?" I dropped the phone and I said, "Dad, they're asking me if Women's International League for Peace and Freedom." Of course, peace and freedom, that's really suspect there. Is that a communist organization? He was so furious. He was so furious. Don't worry about it. No.
So let's move on to talk about the present day, and what are right now the greatest threats to humanity's survival on Earth?
Oh, well, I would say nuclear weapons, the big stashes that we have, 3,500 thermonuclear warheads embedded in US nuclear facilities around the world. That's pretty frightening, with about 7,000 nuclear warheads. I think there is some measure of confidence that nobody at least the US and power is not going to push a nuclear button, but we all lose our tempers, and people could lose their temper. It's really by accidents and miscalculations. So this really drives me to do everything I can to bring really credible, smart people like Rotarians into this discussion.
Do you see the nuclear issue and the prevention of climate change that could also destroy our population as linked?
Yes, ironically, as few as 100 nuclear weapons launched would put so much soot into the air, traveling around the world, along with a lot of radioactivity, that the temperature of the Earth would drop, but not in the way climate change activists would like it, below the growing point. No more native gardens, no more carrots, no more onions, nothing. So that we would experience a worldwide famine with just a very, very infinitesimally small part of the world's stash of nuclear weapons. And not even on purpose. You think like, yeah, he was really mad and he really wanted to punish whatever. But no, just by accident, they thought that the satellite that was kind of flashing on the computer screen was a nuclear missile coming in, and that would just be
Yeah, there's an
Really
incredible
stupid.
report, that from Stephen Colbert about all the key shifts, the key accidents that have happened, that any one of them could have wiped out humanity. And when you think about it, even a limited nuclear war between, just say, Pakistan and India, could actually wipe out our species. And if you think about it, the meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs was only 10 meters in diameter. That couldn't, how many dinosaurs can you kill in that space? But what happened is all the soot that was thrown up in the atmosphere did exactly what you're talking about, wiped out the ability of crops to grow, and then the animals had nothing to eat and they died off. So we are facing, indeed, probably the biggest and most important issue. Why do you think people are so, it doesn't even rank right now on the issues that are in the popular political discussion?
See, people are really in love with climate solutions. And if they ever really thought how much getting rid of nuclear weapons is just the number one, easy to do, we can knock this off in 2 to 3 years if we just get our minds wrapped around it. So we got one easy climate solution right there waiting to be had. We just need the political will and a few people to be brave and courageous.
I love that, an easy climate solution. That's one of the ways we should promote this. And I love that you're thinking about what are the solutions. So how, in a matter of 2 or 3 years, could we wipe out this the most intense threat to the security and safety of our global climate?
Well, I'm quoting Ira Helfand, who knows more than anybody else, and certainly I'm just a baby in arms in terms of my knowledge.
He was on our podcast previously, so people can hear that too. So go ahead. What did Ira say?
So if we would just all say, let's just do it, like we did under Reagan and Gorbachev. Reagan and Gorbachev said, you know, the only solution to this is none of them. They both said that, you know, let's just get rid of them. And they did, but they didn't get rid of all of them. And of course, it's so ironic that now there was a lull of many years where people kind of went to sleep, and in the previous decade just got active again, started warming up. The biggest response, the most consistent response I get from people is, I didn't realize that.
Right. I didn't realize that. And that's what Ronald Reagan said when he watched the film the day after. His generals had been telling him that he could fight and win a nuclear war, and they were egging him on. And after he saw that movie, he said he realized that he had to take steps to do strategic arms limitation talks with the Soviets, and that he had to to find a way to cut back on the threat of nuclear war, and that it would be the end of civilization. So it just took that awakening of a film like that, and then he looked at the scientific reports and he realized that was exactly what we faced. So why is it that we have a current administration that seems pretty progressive in so many other areas, and yet are we seeing any progress in the field of preventing nuclear war?
Boy, I hope so, but I'm not seeing it, and I'm not seeing that people smarter than I am are seeing it either. But we just need time. We're building some steam. We're reaching new audiences. Where in Rotary, it's so fabulous that there are open-minded people everywhere in Rotary clubs we go to. People who just jump on this idea. I was speaking on unarmed civilian protection at Abuja Ambassador Club in Nigeria. And when I told them about my other interests, which is nuclear weapons, I said, we're going to help you with this. We're in. So they sent around the Japanese Survivors Appeal. I got some new signatures. So we just have to get a critical mass out there saying, first, while we do climate change, and in order to be able to do climate change, let's get rid of these things. We made them. We built them with our own hands. We can get rid of them.
Yeah, it is, as you mentioned, a much easier solution than the others. It doesn't have all the other ramifications. All it needs is really, and well, maybe I should ask you the question. I mean, to me, it seems like what we need is an alternative security system that makes people feel more secure without these weapons, and that in fact they don't really do anything to help our security. Is that correct?
Uh, yeah, it's really doable. I think if we tend to think we have to go after all the 9 nuclear powers at once, and they all of a sudden they come out and they make a press release and say, today in unison, today we have decided together we are going to get rid of nuclear weapons. But it can happen more slowly. It can happen like Biden says, we're just going to go ahead and dismantle all the nuclear weapons and warheads that we've already decided we don't need.
Those could be used to provide all the transitional energy needed to move to a alternative energy future, to not build any more, not do any more uranium mining and so on, but just take what's already been misused for weapons, use that to empower temporary solutions, since it already exists anyway, that could power plants around the country while we are building the freeing up the funds to build the alternative systems of wind and geothermal and so on that could completely replace both nuclear and fossil fuels.
And you know, my subcommittee does not have a mission on nuclear reactors, but I will say that's how India got its bomb. They bought a reactor from Canada under the under the provision that it was for peaceful purpose, and it really wasn't. But they did get nuclear reactors. It was what people thought was a great promise. They thought it was safe and cheap, and it turned out to be neither. So I think the solution to nuclear energy is just keep doing the solar and the wind, and get the restrictions off these renewables, because my legislature, many legislatures, put caveats. You have to buy your equipment from Yugoslavia. You have to go through this channel or that channel, just slowing everything down so they can get nuclear forward. It's very sexy, but the taxpayers pay the bill and the corporations get the profit. I don't think that's a really reasonable way to do things.
Well, many people think, oh, abolishing nuclear weapons, yes, that'd be great, but isn't that pie in the sky? And yet, even though in the US, we tend to think of that as not so likely, what about the rest of the world? Have we seen an incredible shift in the question of the legality of weapons around the world?
I'm just judging by my response in Rotary. And I would say there's some people that are just really right there. They've been through this. A lot of them are older people, and they say, yeah, this is terrible. Younger people also are saying, we don't want them. There's still a lot of people that are going, yeah, we shouldn't talk about this in Rotary. And yeah, it's kind of nasty, but we're not going to do anything about it. And I don't know why they think it's so entrenched, but they probably don't know that Reagan, no commie pinko lefty like Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev got rid of 50,000 of them. They just banged them up. They just smashed them down and took out the nasty parts, and I assume safely recycled.
Well, now tell us about the treaty for the prohibition of nuclear weapons and the meaning of it becoming international law.
Well, that was very exciting because a lot of the Japanese survivors, this has been weighing on them heavily for 75 years. And so, of course, they were very much involved. The discussions when the run-up to this treaty have been going on for a decade, with different conferences under the rubric of humanitarian imperative, shifting the argument from you should get rid of yours and we'll get rid of half ours and that sort of thing, to if we don't do something, anything that happens is going to really be nasty. So that's the shift. So the nuclear nations now got to be the big players. They're the ones that are joining in, and that seems counterproductive. But not only do they have to get rid of any traces of their nuclear, if they have any, and some of them do. For instance, Ireland, one of the first to ratify the treaty, already has laws on the books to imprison people who engage in production, manufacturing, transferring, etc., to a person, not a corporation, although it's persons in corporations, persons individually, prison sentences and hefty fines for being involved. And that's before the treaty went into force. So that's one way that's going to happen. Ireland has a problem coming up. They allow US Air Force to land on Shannon, Shannon Airport. The US government, and I assume all governments, don't tell governments where they land what they got inside. But Ireland is going to have to say no to the nuclear, equipment, fuels, mission. They're going to have to get rid of them. And that's how the treaty is going to help them pressure other nuclear nations by saying, you can't do this on our property.
But now, isn't that, so I'm not sure everyone knows overall what's happened. A treaty, tell us briefly the treaty, how many nations ratified it, and what its status is in international law, and what it outlaws.
So let me give you a brief overview. You commit to, as a country, in becoming a states party. This means you're now under obligation not to manufacture, produce, transport, post, stockpile, anything.
Or even aid or abet the production or manufacture or transport, right?
Yeah, any of that stuff. Threaten, use, etc., or test. So that's a pretty big thing. Most of them are not doing these things anyway. Second, they commit to aid to victims and environmental remediation. That's a very big thing. And finally, they may not assist anyone in doing what for their country is now illegal. And my example of Shannon Airport, if a US Air Force plane is carrying nuclear stuff in any way or involved in any kind of nuclear mission, they'll have to say, sorry, you can't land here.
Okay, and now that is official international law, right?
The treaty is now international law for the parties that have ratified.
Okay, so how many nations in the world have ratified it, and how many vote against it?
50 have ratified and are in force. There are 54 that have ratified, and it takes place 3 months after they ratify. There are 32 more who have signed, and they are expected to ratify. 122 voted yes on the resolution in the General Assembly. So we can have some expectations, like countries like Uganda will come in on this, although Uganda signed, but has not. Uganda voted yes, but did not sign or ratify the treaty. Signing is the first step.
And how many voted against it?
1.
Okay, so in other words, this is overwhelmingly the law and the wishes of the people of the world, and the only people dragging their feet are the ones who actually have the nuclear weapons. But if this treaty calls on all of us to neither aid or abet or help it in any way, is there a role that we, the people, that the citizens, that the people-powered planet that Gary was talking about, that we can play a key role in helping to enforce the treaty and to not aid or abet any companies or anyone who is violating that treaty?
Yeah, remember, the only states parties the ones who have which have ratified the treaty, and as it's gone into force, are under legal obligation not to violate the treaty, not to produce, manufacture, et cetera, test, threaten use, okay? So for the most part, they weren't going to do that anyway. So that's why some people are very skeptical. But the fact that they have to start entangling themselves from anything that somebody else is doing, some other country is doing, even not a nuclear hosting country, maybe making nuts and bolts. You see, so you have to be very vigilant on what you do if you're really committed to this treaty. And the good thing is they signed because they wanted to sign. These are very courageous countries. They're countries like South Africa, like Venezuela, Bolivia, El Salvador. They're sick of nuclear weapons. And I have to say, 122 nations are not all the nations in the General Assembly. All the nuclear nations, the host nations like Belgium and Germany, they boycotted the meeting. All US allies boycotted the meeting. The other allies of other countries boycotted the meeting. So they were going to lose anyway because they're already a minority. So if they'd gone to the meetings, they might have been educated. They didn't engage. But the treaty was going to pass anyway because 122 is a majority of the nations.
And I understand the U.S. at the last minute lobbied hard to try to get people to pull out of their ratification, yes. And the nation stood up to that.
Yes, the U.S. and I think other nations first tried to get them to not ratify. And I did hear the woman, the minister from South Africa say, and it was ferocious how they tried to get them not to ratify. But then after they ratified, there were countries that were targeted for, we respect your sovereignty, but we wish you would rescind your ratification. We think it will be best for the world. And they didn't, because they're sick of this. They're sick to threatening the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, where the 5 nuclear powers promised to get rid of them. You have 4 nuclear powers and never promised anything. So you still got a problem, even if the promisers complied.
Okay, so how can, if many times we've seen that even if in, like for instance, the banning of the treaty on landmines, even though the U.S. wasn't a party, all the companies stopped making them because they couldn't do business in other companies, they would be boycotted and so on, and it just wasn't worth it, so they dropped it. How can something similar be done to get the corporations who are involved in making parts or components of nuclear weapons? Like I understand Honeywell, for example, is one, and they have consumer products like thermostats and so on. Are there leverage that we, the people, can use to help enforce this treaty in terms of investments, in terms of products we buy, and use the consumer power of the people to say, hey, this is illegal. We're not going to be a party to aiding or abetting this.
So countries, anybody could do that because Honeywell is involved in making nuclear weapons. But my understanding,
components for nuclear weapons, they don't make the actual things, but they make
doesn't
components.
Keep countries from buying PPE and the other things that Honeywell. But you still have the potential for boycotts. You're identifying these nice things, PPE and medical equipment, with these nasty things that will destroy us. So there's the potential there for some action. But the thing is, the countries that are the state parties can't be involved in anything that they're doing or helping them. So for example, you couldn't have a country that's a state party investing, helping somebody else raise some money, even if it was out of the country. So some of these things are going to have an impact, even if the nuclear don't join, the nuclears could dismantle without anybody's permission, and they could do it bit by bit. So there's this concept in disarmament and possibly elsewhere now that if you can't get consensus like from 9 nations to give up their nuclear weapons, you can give gift baskets. Gift basket is something that a coalition of countries give. It might be a single country unilaterally saying, we're going to get rid of, we're going to stop production of thermonuclear cores. We are now starting to build a new facility to do that at the Y-12 plant in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Totally nuts. Very expensive. On an antiquated old building. They're building new thermonuclear cores for US weapons. So yes, you could say, we're going to stop the construction at Y-12. That would be a big deal.
Well, once we build these facilities and once companies are making a lot of money running them and so on, doesn't that take on a life of its own, which makes political pressure that helps prevent us from getting rid of these weapons?
That's my contention all along. This is an industry program. This is a social welfare program. This is a corporate welfare program. We say we so detest when people are poor, but when they're really rich, money is no object of support, and so that's where the divestment comes in. That they've been pretty successful in getting people to get rid of nuclear weapons, just as they got rid of landmines, and tobacco and alcohol, cruelty to animals, and other things like that.
So where can some people go, for instance, to be part of that divestment campaign? How can they get their pension funds, any of the different funds that they're part of investing in to get them to remove their support for anything illegal or their involvement in aiding and abetting the illegal nuclear weapon?
Well, I can tell you some things that people are working on right now. New York City has agreed to divest from nuclear weapons. That's really a big deal. They haven't done it yet, but it got halted during the COVID era, but I anticipate that they're going to be back. You can divest your own portfolio. Some of us have very small ones, but we can look and see. My pension fund, which is TIAA-CREF for professors, does have nuclear weapons, so I send them an email every now and then. I'd like to speak to the director. I'm sending this to the director. I send it to the investment part of the investment place on the website, and I say, I see you're investing in nuclear weapons. Please move away from it. And that in itself is not going to do anything, but it's the kind of thing you can do sitting while you're reading your mail and say, oh, I haven't done that this month, so I'm going to send this out. People in the US can go to Back from the Brink and help their city send a resolution to their federal government, as they do in other countries. So divestment and statements from cities can divest. I will be involved with Union of Concerned Scientists to get St. Paul to take a stand on maybe do a resolution and maybe divest.
What about don't bank on the bomb?
Don't bank on the bomb is just a very, very good way to go. For most of us, we have to learn about this stuff first. So that's why in my work, it's mostly education, and most talking about it. People know what to do once they know what the situation is and who's doing what.
I understand that in addition to working on nuclear weapons, you've played a key role in war prevention. You've worked in Sudan and so on in conflict areas. Tell us about your work with the Nonviolent Peace Force,
right,
and other work you've done to actually prevent conflicts on the ground. Well, not prevent, but to handle them in a more sane way than just killing each other.
Nonviolent Peace Force and their work, and I was a peacekeeper at one time, unarmed civilian protector in Guatemala. This is what gives me hope when I say no to war and no to nuclear weapons. here is something you can do, and probably the best investment you can do. But I brought a couple pictures along to show you the pictures I most love about myself and other people. I visited Nonviolent Peace Force a year before after they got started, after independence by about 4 months. And people just said it was so wonderful. They could stay up at night, they could play their music, trucks were rolling through them, businesses were coming back, people were taking the boards off windows. And my team did a training. I'm sitting here with Rocky Ambego, who was one of our protectors there. He's helping me translate with this young woman who came. Nonviolent Peace Force always has women at their trainings. There's no excuse just to have an all-men's training. And the woman in front walked 20 kilometers to get there. Although Nonviolent Peace Force provides transportation, food, and lodging. You can see some of it in the back there for the training. But she was so afraid that since she lived 20 kilometers away, that if she didn't walk, she couldn't be sure she was going to be there, because what she said to me was, what if they had to take somebody else on the motorcycle? She wasn't afraid of the motorcycle. She was just afraid that somebody maybe with more importance of some kind might get priority. And then she would be 20 kilometers away and there would be no way to get there in time for the training. But it was a weekend training. It was absolutely wonderful. 3 chiefs from warring tribes the previous year were there to learn how to do this. And
so these tribes were warring. What kind of war was going on, and how did this play a role in helping them to make peace?
Yeah, it's cattle keepers versus farmers. Cattle keepers think they have a right to graze everywhere. And well, that's certainly been the tradition. It's such a tense thing that they have to force themselves in. They have to bring guns along with them. So people shoot them first. They shoot other people back. And then they just rampage. They break things down. They go into gardens. They dirty the water supply. So now what they came up with, not in this training, but in a training where there was actual conflict going on, was the cattle keeper had to go to his chief before he went anywhere with his cattle. And he had to get a letter of introduction from the chief. He would take it to the chief in the farmer community. And the farmer chief would say, okay, you know, there's land over there, you can go there, there's water here. You can't go near the garden, you can't go near the houses. That brought legitimacy, it brought accountability, it brought responsibility. And it was amazing. But these were the farmers and the cattle keepers that decided this, were not advisors. We kept them safe.
That's very interesting, because it's an actual, you know, a solution that seems easy, but we miss out on it when, for instance, in the nuclear area, we just, you know, do positioning, and we're going to force other people to do our way by threatening the total annihilation of the planet. And that really, when you come down to it, any one of these problems that we're thinking about handling with the threat of nuclear war could just be worked out in some of the same peaceful ways you're talking about, right? Absolutely.
And I should say the treaty, just like the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, does have safeguards and inspections and so forth. So yes, you need some monitoring. People will cheat, but in fact, that community, in those 2 communities, worked very well. And partly because we had UCPs in both places. We were trusted not to hurt them, not to sell them short, or force them into anything they didn't want to do.
Well, I think about, you know, trusting others and reaching out. I think about when it looked like Iran, that Israel was very close to attacking Iran, possibly with nuclear weapons, to try to prevent their nuclear weapons. Kind of a crazy idea. And many Israelis started doing a "We Love Iran" campaign and getting it out in social media and so on. and began to make it look so foolish to be doing this that they kind of backed off. Let me turn it over to Melanie.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for that. And very positive. I like the corporate welfare program statement you made. Great. So great to have some new people here. Thank you and welcome. And for those who celebrate St. Patrick's Day, happy St. Patrick's Day. And happens to be the wedding day of my parents. Yay. I'm glad they did that. So what we can do now is go to questions. We have Dennis is our first person to ask questions. Dennis, go right ahead, unmute yourself, and you can ask your question. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Anne. And one of the things I think the challenge is to understand what the benefits are for the nuclear weapons countries to give it up. And one of the things, if you're a smaller country, I mean, it's having a nuclear weapon sort of levels the playing field. And the thing is, if you put yourself in the shoes of North Korea and even Pakistan, you know, having a nuclear weapons, I think, is in their protective interest. And because I just wondered, you know, if Iraq had nuclear weapons, would we, Bush, etc., be so eager to invade the country? And I think this is what concerns North Korea and Pakistan, is being invaded by a bigger country. And so I think, so that's in a sense a question for all of us as far as empathy and putting ourselves in the shoes of these people and seeing in their self-interest, why would they give it up? And I mean, we know for ourselves, hopefully, but you know, it's a question. I think it'd be interesting for discussion.
Well, it kind of works both ways. And I think I can kind of see in the mindset of DPRK, North Korea, they might think that maybe they could keep the world from nuking them or invading them or whatever it is they most fear. We've certainly done enough threatening of them. They might think that. I think Pakistan, when India got the bomb, they probably thought, well, if we don't have a nuclear weapon, you know, we're going to be toast here. But the nuclear nations who have either moved away from nuclear weapons, like South Africa and Kazakhstan, they're saying, you know, wait, you nuclear nations, you say they're your security, and then you make rules that we can't get them? How does this work? If it's deterrence for you, how come it's not deterrence for us? Are you promising not to nuke us or invade us? So you see, it works both ways. I think the deterrence argument was just very good propaganda that never was any measure of truth. And even if there were, it's so dangerous. And it has been. Actually, you know, we'd like to say that there were 2 bombs dropped, but actually there were about 2,000, because in the course, countries, nuclear weapons, countries thought they had to test. And I don't know how you could, if you were France, why you would need 67 detonations on the Marshall Islands to find out, do these things work? We tested in Nevada. You know, what's the proportionality in all of this? So if you're going to expand your nuclear weapons supply, you're going to want to test. So what's the difference on the impact? Yeah, it's all the same. You bomb somebody else, you bomb yourself. And then you do it over and over and over and over again. So I think there's a whole lot of illogicalness in this and in the argument for deterrence. But I would never say that a country might not feel that way. Or I know people personally who argue, I feel safer because we have lots of nuclear weapons. So you know, that's who they are. That's how they feel. I could say, if they knew what I knew, they probably would not say that. But
And that is so important. Your words are very sobering. I think this information needs to get out. I mean, we just have to deal with the horrendousness of the situation, and we're in a crisis, and we just have to say, okay, well, let's move forward. It's so funny how all these, I was panicked before about, I would hear a sonic boom. I'm like, oh, that's the atom bomb. Oh my God, you know, it's just, and then you forget about it, and it seemed like it was okay, and it's not okay, and we have to continue reminding people. And then this idea of rationalizing it in different ways to make people feel safer. That's just, yeah, we got to get rid of that. Wow, thank you so much for being here. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we do have a question, Abdul. So if you can unmute yourself, that'd be great. Get your question.
I appreciate your work for humanity. I thankful you all team. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abdul, for being here from Pakistan. That's so great. All right, now let's go to our next question. We have Barbara. Barbara, if you could please ask your question.
One of the things you said, Anne, that really got me was plutonium. What do you do with all this spent plutonium? Somebody was going to put it in a missile and put it around the earth. Can you imagine another horror? Well, anyway, the waste from nuclear weapons is just amazing. And the waste from the nuclear power plants also. What do you do with all this waste? There's no place to put it. Our earth is just so fragile.
If you read this Trisha Pritikin's book on Hanford plant, it's now the most toxic place in the country, in the US. They produced plutonium for 60,000 nuclear weapons. They made the bomb for the Trinity test. They made Fat Boy for the dropped on Nagasaki. And of course the detonations, because they're radioactive, it's not just the trauma and the bombing, because you can get through those more or less. When it's radioactive stuff, you just can't get through it. It's always there. Uranium, high-level uranium lasts for 7 billion years. How can we do this? So then there's the cost. It's just like Physicians for Social Responsibility. Every year they calculate how much it comes out of your paycheck. And my argument is like, this money can be used at home, you know, pay kids tuition. $1,000 for a family on a $32,000 income with 5 family members. Now, that's probably a poverty, practically a poverty level income. And this is food off the table. This is housing not paid. And people don't see the dollars coming out of their pocketbooks like without their permission.
Now that we've heard you, Anne, and we're all convinced that this is the way to go, could you give us a couple sound bites and actions that we can take now that we've heard you? Is there, I'm going to go to Dennis gave us a website to go to, which I will go to, and a Facebook page, so that we can read that. But from your own personal experience, what has been the most effective way to get the message out?
Well, the global meetings have been fabulous. We had 8 last year, and we all, I say what we're doing is educating ourselves and each other. So when we recommend to people, there's a peace action webinar coming up. This looks really good. There was one today on nuclear and the weapons in the Middle East just in the past hour. We tweet. When we see something like, why are we spending $100 billion on a new weapon? We tweet it around, we put it on a Facebook page. And then there are people like Dennis who just goes on the Rotary website and he creates a discussion group. And then he creates a Facebook page for people to jump onto. And you go like, boy, if everybody would do that, we'd already have a better world. And I think that there's one thing that we can do. And we learned this in the last administration, that when we demonize people, we devalue them, and that's the fertile ground for whatever we want to do with them. Or if we're the demonized, we're the ones who are going to get it. I think the one most important thing that we could all do in our chats with other people, when we hear other people saying, oh, so-and-so, no good, you know, just this and that, and calls them names, especially racist names or pejorative terms. We need to stop that. When we're in the field with unarmed civilian protection, that goes. We never do that because we try to be balanced and able to be trusted on both sides. So you can't say something nasty about somebody, even if the person has a serial killer, mass murderer. We don't call them that when they're in a field of war, but you know, that's what they are. If we start calling them a ding dong or a what's up, you know, we'll have to face that again. So it interferes with our work and it makes us untrustable and hurtful people. So it's good practically, but also the less we do it, the better world we have that day for all the people in our circle.
Thank you, Barbara. Thank you for your question and all those great tips. Wow, Anne. And then, yeah, thinking of all this, all the waste around. There's Beth Leeds on the call right now. She's working on San Onofre and their problems with the containment. We also have, I'd like to read in the chat, we have Shanti wanted to say, in New Mexico, we have radioactive material in our water table from nuclear testing done through Los Alamos labs. The world would be a better place with one less polluted water table. Oh my gosh, yes. And then Shanaz said, great presentation, much for concern and reflection on the human plight and its vulnerability to the weapons of destructions. And also we have Adma, says all the energy used to build nuclear weapons can be used to give energy and electricity to many poor countries, to help also many people around the world. So that's beautifully, beautifully said. Thank you so much. And then now I'd like to go to, and lots of great things from Dennis you'll want to read in the chat. We have Kale, if you'd like to go ahead with your question.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for putting your attention on this most diabolical of situations that humanity has kind of put us in. I'm kind of looking at this, I mean, obviously, the legacy of nuclear weapons, just the waste and all of that, just the harm already done is just indescribable to the waterways, to the humanity, the illnesses, everything like that. If those people, the voices of the rivers and all could be heard, there would be a loud scream going on the planet already without a bomb going off, without more. Anyway, I've been looking at the nuclear power, the waste from nuclear power issue, particularly at San Onofre. And I've taken kind of a deep dive. And at the beginning of your presentation, you mentioned, Anne, that they put in nuclear power in India, I think. And you said atoms for peace. You almost said atoms for peace. And that's what it is. After they dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they did a quick flip. And they said, oh my God, this is so terrible, but there's so much power and there's so much money in it. How can we, you know, and they did atoms for peace, and they pulled the biggest scam on us ever, was to say atoms for peace, was the nuclear industry. So now 60 years later, we have the waste. So, and what's really very concerning is how they're storing the waste and how the NRC is not really doing their job to regulate for safe containment. So my theory is that just the canisters at San Onofre and the canisters across the country, over 3,000 of them, that crack, they have no way to inspect, they have no way to repair. They have to be repackaged into casks that you can maintain over time. And so just just looking at the canisters and the history of all of the uranium mining, all of the fuel processing, all the communities that have been harmed just in creating the fuel, and then now the huge cost, forever cost of this forever waste, is enough to like put a huge amount of attention on just nuclear power. Because currently there's a huge, huge motivation to use new nuclear as a response to climate change. I mean, the crisis, they're saying nuclear. So, I mean, I feel like I have a whole lot I want to share, but I'm all over the place a little bit, but really it's nuclear weapons, nuclear energy is the biggest sham that humanity has ever fallen for. And I think just the waste of the nuclear power is our way of pushing back. So anybody who wants more information on this, go to sanonofresafety.org. And there's a ton of information on that. There's a petition at the top. You can sign that. We'll send you an update.
Please contact me, because although I don't work on nuclear reactor issues directly, at least through Rotary, I do have some contacts with the group that's concerned about shipments. And just to give you an example, 100 huge trucks with liquid, highly radioactive material passed 4 miles from my daughter's house on its way from Canada to South Carolina, where they have storage facilities. I was really glad to hear when the shipments ended, but it doesn't mean I'm safe. I spoke to our safety director from the state of Minnesota. He said, "Ann, please understand the duty of public safety in this state is to secure the area. Someone else has to come and pick it up if it spills." Well, who would that be? I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
They're making assumptions that the feds who permit the shipping companies, they're all private companies, come back up.
Wow.
I have not been able to find out. Supposedly, theoretically, there's some kind of a SWAT team, but
Oh my
they're
gosh.
invisible.
Wow. Thank you. Ugh. Ann. Ugh. Okay, so yeah, very scary, but doable, and we can fix this, and we've made it this mess, we can fix it, and we can't just shy away from it and pretend it's not there. I mean, so that is about all the time we have today. We have rich questions. Everyone, lots of great stuff in the chat, so go ahead and save that. Go to participants, go by your name, there's 3 dots, save the chat. And now we'd like to I want to thank you, Ann, personally from me. Oh my gosh. And now we're going to go back to Arthur. Arthur, take it away.
Yes, well, it is very appropriate that we are doing this on St. Patrick's Day, because, you know, Ireland was a leader in getting the Treaty on Nuclear Weapons passed, and they implemented legislation in December of 2019, you know, making it official and standing up to NATO and the nations that wanted to push nuclear weapons on them, and to really stand up for a better world. So I think we have to do a salute to Ireland in this case for being a nuclear-free nation. Yay, Ireland. I also want to thank all the participants. I see that Dennis has given us another little soundbite. Nuclear weapons they're 4 I's. They are illegal, immoral, illogical, and insane. So I thank Ann for sharing with us the idea that it's one of the easiest, most effective things we can do for the environment. There's been so much environmental damage that's already happened from nuclear weapons, and by making them, by just getting 4 more nations to go along with what's already illegal, just make them illegal or enforce that from people power, so that the companies all stop doing it, because they can't make it without, you know, the government doesn't sit there in Washington, D.C. and make these nuclear weapons and tinkering them. They need companies to do it. And if the companies refuse to do it, they're out of business. So, but of course, the companies right now are making big money on it, and that's why they do it. And this is where we can help turn it around by making it not profitable for them. So anyway, thank you so much, all of you, for joining us on this episode of the People Powered Planet podcast. We will let Ann, if she wants to give us a particular website or URL, she's put her email in already, but give us the key website she'd like us to go to, or how we get on her email list about nuclear weapons. And then I will tell you a little bit about next week's speaker, but let me let Ann do a final close, and then I will do that.
If somebody could put in the chat, Rotarians.peakinstitute.org. Dennis, if you're still on, you could do that, and invite people to sign our petition to support the Japanese survivors of nuclear weapons. I would say take Dennis's 4 I's and put them in your signature. I think that would be just perfect.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ann. Next week we have some amazing guests. We have Kasia Slavner, who is a Generation Z, multi-award-winning first-time documentary filmmaker who at age 16 set out across the world to film The Sunrise Storyteller. She's completing it in high school. She made this documentary in high school. It's been taking off in film festivals and all over. And she's passionate about using visual storytelling to make the world a better place. So do take a look at peoplepoweredplanet.com, and you can see her exciting adventure coming up. We also want to remind everyone that this is a key time for getting out The World Is My Country. Gary Davis realized that the problem is we're in a broken nation state system, and the corporations have all the power to push these weapons and everything because they operate globally while we the people are locked in these boxes called nation states. Once we break out, we the people are the superpower who can truly save our world, make an ecological, safe, and secure world for all of us. So do go to theworldismycountry.com/public TV. There you'll see the many public television stations who are already signing up to show this film. You can look at it and see if the program's being shown in your community. And if it is, you can contact, there's a whole resource kit we have. There's incredible resources that you can use right in your community, press releases, things you can put in your newsletter, nice graphics you can put to promote it out in your area. So if you do see your area already on the PBS list, a list of public television stations broadcasting it, jump onto that kit and get your promo material and get things out to all of the all your friends and newsletters and groups that you're working with. And then also, if it's not on that list, well, here's what you can do. First of all, they say stations don't like to be deluged with, okay, here's a campaign, you know, you fill in the blank and you all start deluging them with saying, oh, you should show this program or that. But what they do love is community engagement. They love it if people in their community will, for instance, if they already are showing it, contact them and say, you know, let's help you get out word about this. But also, they especially love local sponsors. Now, many Rotarians and others are very active already with their local public television stations. And sometimes for quite a low cost, you can run an ad for your local Rotary, for your local organization, your group, right along with this film. And what a great demographic. I mean, people who are going to watch The World Is My Country are the kind of people who will want to come to your clubs and organizations and so on. Take a look at that. This is a real opportunity for everyone to do outreach, to get out to others, and to help build a world free of nuclear weapons and in which we, the people, create the people-powered planet.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.